Welcome to Just the Fax, episode number 24, with our very special guest, Mark Weida, independent dealer from the Colorado Springs area. We wanted to talk today, Mark, about adapting to the current environment, right? It's been a crazy 2.5 years, but at the end of the day, some dealers have been successful, right? So we're hoping to shed a little light on that. Can you just share with us kind of what you've gone through and what you've had to do to adapt a little bit?
Absolutely. The challenges have been many, not the least, of course, and I'm sure that most dealers have felt the pain of the market crunch and how first there was the prices plummeted and then prices skyrocketed and everyone was speculating that they were going to stabilize, and they haven't been. There's been segments of the market where there's been some stability.
Yeah.
Sedans and so forth have kind of leveled out a little bit, some of them, but the majority of the prices are still stuck way up there. And then the supply, with the supply chain and everything else that has gone on with the chip shortage and the new car manufacturers, as new vehicles are more scarce, then the later model used ones are more scarce, and therefore the entire market still remains inflated.
You, like me, we've been around a little while, right?
Yep.
We didn't start yesterday, and we have much of the same background, right? We started out in franchise dealers. 25 years ago or something, you started out in franchise dealers, right?
Actually, longer than that. I worked for franchise dealers for 25 years before I started my own company. Got out of college, was submitting applications to graduate school. Never had any money. Started selling cars because I needed to make a paycheck.
Sounds familiar, yeah.
and just kind of fell in love with it. Fell in love with the business.
I was trying to be nice to you 25 years ago.
Yes.
So you've had your dealership now for almost 11 years, correct?
Correct. Right at 11 years, yes.
So, so often on this show, we talk franchise, right? Because that's just a big thing. But what did you find transitioning from the franchise world to the independent world? So forget the latest stuff. We'll go back there in a second. But I'm also finding it interesting because a lot of people have gone from the franchise, whether they're used car managers or GM, and they want to kind of do their own thing. So they kind of toe dip, and then either they like it or they don't, for the most part, right? So what kind of transitioned you? How did you go from franchise dealer to independent dealer?
The main motivation for that was so that I could spend more time with my family, with my daughters as they were growing up. But when I decided where I wanted to go with the business, used cars to me was always the most fun. It was the most challenging. Identifying the proper used car. What does somebody want, and can I find that car? Can I merchandise that car? Can I offer that car to my customers and have a better used car at a better price than the franchise stores can? Because quite frankly, most of us independents don't have the overhead that the big Taj Mahal stores do.
That's right.
So that was kind of it. And I've always loved buying and selling used cars. That was the most fun out of everything I did, working for franchise dealerships. And so that's where my heart was.
It's funny, when I talk to a lot of different dealers, when you're working with the franchise dealer, if you're not the owner, it's kind of a little bit like monopoly money, right? You're buying cars and you're being careful and you're making decisions, and they can be costly and it costs you a little money, but it wasn't your money, right? When you're an independent, not everyone, but a lot of them, it's Right Front National is the bank behind that dealership, right?
Yep.
So the pain and the gain and the stay, it's a lot magnified. So making that transition for you, was there one or two things that were a little uncomfortable? Going from that world to your own world kind of thing? And now, do you still worry about that stuff, or is that just starting it out, that kind of stuff gets in the way? So in today's world, with everything that's going on, is where I'm going with this question. Do you feel in a better position because you're in control of your own destiny? Or is there a certain safety net to being back in the franchise world? Being in both, which would you rather be in today?
As challenging as today's market conditions are, I still think I would rather be in control of my own destiny.
Okay.
I like the feel. I know that, for example, there's ups and downs in the car business. There always has been. And market conditions, we're all subject to it. But being in control of a smaller operation, we stock between 100 and 150 used cars. And when we're doing our best, we sell between 70 and 80.
Yeah.
We've done as many as in the 90s. But that to me is fun, and that's a challenge. And I do make each car stand on its own. When I make a decision to buy a car, or if we trade for a car, we decide to keep a car, I know very well that that's my money, and I need to figure out if I'm going to be able to make that car make sense for one of my customers and still make a fair profit.
Nice. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So you mentioned that you stock 130 to 150, typically sell 80, right? Is that still true today? Is that pre-COVID, or is that where you're at today? And is there a difference between pre-COVID and where you're at today?
Pre-COVID, I was a little more aggressive.
Okay.
Because I still do a significant amount of wholesale business, 2 franchise stores. I decide what I'm going to keep, and then what I'm going to keep for retail, and then what I want to wholesale. I buy a vehicle thinking it makes sense for someone.
Yeah.
And then I decide later if I want it to make sense for my lot. But I have become a little more, I wouldn't say conservative, but I think maybe a little more prudent, a little more careful about when I buy a car, making sure that, okay, if I'm going to buy this vehicle, I need to know that it has a home. If it's going to have a home on my retail lot, great. If it's going to have a home at a Chevy dealer that I do business with or a Lexus dealer that I do business with, I have that in mind when I'm buying the vehicle.
So a question for you. I know you sit on the association board, right? In fact, you chair one of those, correct?
Correct. I'm the chairman for the Colorado board.
So when you look at the full suite of dealers that are out there, right? There's a wide variety of dealers. Is there one commonality or two commonalities that they've all had to adjust to? Is there anything that's common, or is it strictly depends on the type of dealership you are? Or is there a common thread with independent dealers today that have had to make one or two adjustments that they've all had to make? What would you think with that?
I think the common thread would be that despite, I mean, regardless of what size the dealership is, they're still probably more aware of current market conditions, rising interest rates, prices being high, shortage of inventory. It doesn't matter whether you're a mom and pop. 70% of all independent dealers have 5 employees or less. A lot of people don't realize that.
Right.
So I think those smaller stores have to be even more careful, because when they're stocking 15 cars or 18 cars versus 120 or 130, and so they have to make sure that every single car makes sense for them. It's easier on a bigger operation if you bump your head, stub your toe, whatever you want to say. Yeah. It's like, okay, I screwed up on that one. It's going to go away. I'm going to lose a couple grand. Well, when you're only selling 15, 18 cars a month, I mean, it takes a lot of that gross profit to make up for those mistakes.
That makes a lot of sense. It is funny. One of the things we get asked, of course, at Carfax with the amount of dealers we work with, I think there's a misconception out there, at least I've experienced it, that people think everyone wants to grow, and get big. Well, that's not the case, right? At least I found that not to be the case. There's something to be said about a manageable family business, and you get to a certain volume, you need more people. You need more of this. You need more of that. You need more exposure. You end up with a bigger, right? Would you agree with that?
No.
There's a sweet spot for everybody, right? For some people, it's 30 cars. For some people, it's 60 cars, to your point. So it's funny. Funny's the wrong word, but it's interesting to watch all the moving pieces and what people have done to adapt, right? Out of everything that you've had to do, is there one or two things that you would say will carry through? Even when things get to whatever normal is going to be, no one knows what that is, but it'll be settled down a little bit, everyone assumes. When things settle down and get more into a rhythm, are there one or two things that you've changed strictly because you had to with the COVID situation that you think will carry forward because you're finding it to be a better business model or more efficient or more, more profitable, any of those kind of things? Is there one or two things that you feel will carry forward?
It's kind of a loaded question, but yeah, I do feel like there are. As I said, I think I pay more attention to the details now.
Yeah.
I'm a little more careful with every dollar I spend, especially when it comes to marketing. Too often, many of us, when things are slow, feel like, well, let's just throw in a little extra money out there and let's go ahead and hire some more providers and make sure we're on this third-party website or make sure we're here, we're there.
Yeah.
I think I'm focusing more on organic right now.
Okay.
Continuing to focus on our reputation, the quality of our cars, our customer base, and learning. I feel like every lot has its own DNA. It develops its own DNA. What might work on your lot might not necessarily work on my lot.
Right, that makes sense.
So I think we have to be more aware of, what is the personality of our lot? I mean, who are we, and what are our customers going to find? I don't have customers coming to my lot to buy $80,000 pickup trucks. But I also don't have anybody coming to my lot to buy $1,800 cars either.
Right.
So we learn what works at our lot. And part of that is just by trial and error. But I think any dealer, whether you're 8 to 10, 12 cars a month, or whether you're 150 to 200 cars a month, everyone has to be more aware of what's going to work for me now, because the market conditions being what they are, the availability of inventory being so scarce, and the other thing that comes into mind is I don't let them sit around like I used to. I mean, I turn my inventory as quickly as possible.
So you're more aggressive.
Like I said, well, the one, like, if you bump your head, I don't compromise my reconditioning standards regardless of what I own the car for.
Right.
Sometimes I'll have a car, by the time I'm finished with it in the service department, it goes online at an $1,800 loss right out of the gates. Okay, I bump my head on that one, but I'm not going to cut corners to make it go away. I'm still going to uphold my standards. We're going to sell the car to a customer that knows that it doesn't matter. They don't know whether we're making money or losing money, but they're going to be happy with their car, and then I'm going to move on to the next one.
That makes a lot of sense. So overall, if you could give a recommendation to the dealers listening today, right? What's one thing they could do without spending an exorbitant amount of money? What's something internally they can at least look at, something they can make some adjustments to? Is there one thing you would recommend to our dealers to take a look at, see if there's some capability or opportunity there without spending a lot of money? Because not everyone wants to spend a lot of money at the moment, right? And there's certain things you can do. You and I had a discussion about listings. Changing your listings a little bit doesn't cost you any money, but it does take a little bit of time. Is there one thing like that you could think of that you could share with other dealers that maybe they should look at, and maybe there's some opportunity there for them?
Well, you mentioned, again, we had the conversation earlier, optimizing your website, your descriptions, making them more accessible and more, what's the right word? Make them more relevant to the customer. So the customer, something that they can feel. Too often people they're overwhelmed by too many facts, too much information, and they want to know, okay, what is this vehicle, and is it the right one, and how can it work for me? Because people are scared to death when they go to make a decision.
It's a lot of money.
The other thing that I think that's extremely important, and even more so post-COVID, because people got used to doing more digital inquiries. They were trying to do as much as possible. In fact, some dealerships now are doing everything online. We sell cars out of state sometimes, never see the customer, and everything's done electronically. In spite of all that, though, your processes have to be just dialed in, and you have to make sure that you don't compromise anything. And because of that, I'm extremely selective on who comes to work for me, because I want to make sure they're people of high integrity and that they're not going to cut corners, because you don't want, as hard as I've worked to get the reputation I have, I don't want one person coming in and all of a sudden they just cut a corner, or they aren't upfront or honest with the customer about something, and then next thing I know is I've got a bad review out there because they, and in that case it would be rightfully so, are complaining that we didn't do something right.
No, it's interesting. I just heard it said yesterday that when you're hiring, you should be hiring personality and not history, right? Like when you're looking at who you're going to hire for your dealership, it's exactly what you just said. Do they fit what you want your dealership to be representative of? Will they do the right thing when the right thing isn't being watched? That kind of stuff, right? You can find lots of experience, you know that. You don't want them all. You don't want most of them, right? Because they just don't fit. To your point, every dealer is different. So that was interesting you just said that, because just yesterday I listened to that, and it struck me. I never really thought of it that way, for hiring personality and not necessarily experience, right? And it is true. You can take a brand new employee, if they're the right fit, within a few days they're starting to walk, and within a month they're running anyway. Now you got a solid, right? So I know hiring people is another challenge today, right? The pool is diminished, whether it's inventory, whether it's people, whether it's whatever. So that's a good point you brought up. That's very interesting. One last question I wanted to have for you, and then we'll end this program. But today, there's a lot of influence, a lot of crazy influence. We're butting up against elections. We're butting up against the COVID's release. Then it's back on. Then it's released, right? But you come to the show today. I spent some time with you today. Positive. You haven't had a negative comment since we've been talking. Since we were talking earlier, you wear it proudly. You don't seem to be too affected by the outside world. At least that's your appearance you're giving me, right? I compliment you for that. Is there anything you could tell the dealers to give them a little confidence in today's world? Can we finish it with that? What would be the one thing you could tell a dealer that enables them to maybe have a little more hope than they have currently, or reduce a little bit of their frustration? Because at the end of the day, you need to stay on offense. The minute you're in defense, you're going backwards. Going backwards is not something you want to do today. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely.
So is there one thing you could tell them to give them confidence? Because you seem very confident in the same market everyone's in, and I compliment you on that. Is there anything you could share with our audience to finish this up?
Well, I think just to remember that this too shall pass. I mean, everybody, as long as I've been doing this, there's ups and downs. We've had, severe depressions. I opened my dealership, my independent dealership, in the middle of a depression,
right,
in a recession. It wasn't a true depression, but a recession. And people thought I was crazy opening a dealership then. We sold 20 cars our first month. We were profitable our first month, but I started out really small. So I caution everyone to don't be overly aggressive. Be careful. Start small and grow as you can. Use as much cash as you can to grow. Don't leverage yourself. Don't go heavily into debt, because then when the bad times hit and there's a downturn, you still have all these bills, and now the revenue's not coming in. So for years, I was very, very conservative. For example, my rooftop, my first dealership, I have two now. I upfitted everything. I put new stucco, new lights, new concrete, new this or that. But I did it over time. I waited until I could write checks for it. I didn't want to go heavily into debt for it. So not being in a position to where I'm going to have my bills are far going to outweigh any downturn in my income puts me in a position where I can feel confident even when things are not good.
Well, you heard it, folks. Thank you for Mark for joining our program today. We look forward to talking to you in future broadcasts. And Mark,
thank you.
Thank you for your time today.